I just beat every Family Guy video game ever. Well, 2 of them. Now, I loved licensed games as a kid. It took up 90% of my collection. I don't know, I just saw something like Drawn to Life and didn't find myself getting hooked. But add SpongeBob to it and that's a whole other story. My favorite licensed game ever that I find myself playing for hundreds of hours was The Simpsons Hit and Run. Being a mega fan of the show, I would boot that thing up just to run around Springfield, kicking civilians into the stratosphere. It took me like 10 years of playing the game to even beat it because I would get so carried away with having fun in the sandbox they give ya. Despite licensed games having a pretty negative reputation, them usually being seen as nothing more than cheap cash-ins to rake in profits off the back of an established IP, which let's be real, most of them are, that didn't mean a genuinely fantastic one wouldn't slip through the cracks every now and then. The aforementioned Hit and Run, SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, South Park The Stick of Truth, others, I'm sure. Lucky for me, all these were based off shows I was already a huge fan of. But there was always one program I loved to watch, and was just clamoring for a video game where I got to play as my favorite characters and explore the world they lived in. That show being, naturally,
It seems today that all you see is
When looking up the amount of games based off The Simpsons or SpongeBob, you'll be met with a list longer than, I don't know, the longest piece of English literature. What is that again? The Lighthouse Revamped. The Lighthouse fanfiction that currently has over 34 million words. What the fuck? Anyways, Simpsons has like 30 games to its name. Family Guy has like 2. To be fair, Family Guy did come out like a decade after, but you'd at least think there'd be more than that, right? However, the most we got were a series of Flash or Java phone games. It's strange because it's really not hard to picture a Family Guy Mario Party clone or something. You can pick one of the kooky characters to play as, and each minigame is treated like a cutaway gag. It writes itself. But no. Instead, we have a single video game released on the PlayStation 2 and Xbox in 2006, and another video game released on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2012. And that's it. Unless you want to count weird Candy Crush clones or pinball. Either way, it didn't matter to me how few Family Guy games there were. I needed to play them the second I found out about their existence. That day seemingly coming when I was walking through a used video game store and found a copy of the first one for PS2, being sold for a measly 50p. So I picked it up, ran over to my dad and asked if I could have it, to which he promptly replied, "No." The parking outside cost more than this. What do you mean, no? He grabbed the game out of my hand and showed me the back of the cover, looked me in the eyes and said, "Look at that. Do you really want that?" I was stumped. It's Family Guy the video game. How could I not want it? But all I could do was look at the floor and reply, "I guess not." And so, I went home that day. Family Guy the video game-less. Until a couple years later, when I went to that same video game store and saw this, Family Guy Back to the Multiverse for the Xbox 360. I came in here to get Minecraft, but fuck that, I'll just get both. Nobody can stop me now, except for the guy at the till who made me get my mom's permission to buy it. But I got home, played Minecraft for 20 minutes, got bored and also scared of the spiders, and so proceeded to spend the rest of my weekend beating the entire Family Guy game. And I loved it. This is one of my most played games of all time. The story only takes like 4 hours to get through, but I wished it took 40. And so I would just replay the thing over and over and over again, loving every second of it. For an avid Family Guy fan, it was all I could ever ask for. But that was like 10 years ago at this point. Does it still hold up? Was it ever any good in the first place? Well, that's the question that sparked the creation of this very video. Wow. So I'm sitting down and beating every single Family Guy video game. Again, all 2 of them, to answer, fittingly, 2 questions. Is Back to the Multiverse a good game? And was my dad right in saying the first one looked like crap? So without further ado, let's get started by beating... Wow, it's like I'm really there. Family Guy, the video game, was published by 2K Games. The year after releasing Family Guy, they put out BioShock. I think it's safe to say which ended up having a bigger cultural impact. Despite being published by 2K, it was actually developed by High Voltage Software, who got their start with such hits as White Man Can't Jump for Atari Jaguar and Nicktoons MLB. Those poor bastards. I haven't played many of their other releases. I remember wanting a lot of them, like Ben 10 Protector of Earth and their Stitch game, so I can't tell if this is a common thing among all their projects. But if there's one thing I can give this Family Guy game, it's that you can tell they were fans. You could tell it was a property they were genuinely excited to work with, even if the gameplay doesn't always reflect that. We'll get to it. I'm always so curious at who's in charge of inserting these references for games based off TV shows. Like, there's no way that these developers were personally interested in every IP they had to work with. At least I hope not. So who knows, maybe a lot of the deep-cut Family Guy references came down from the show staff or Fox or whatever, but it's appreciated nonetheless. Family Guy the video game is split up into 3 chunks. Hope you weren't excited to play as Lois, Meg, or Chris, as they are almost completely absent from this adventure, instead focusing on Peter, Brian, and Stewie, each character played by Seth MacFarlane. Huh. I wonder if they figured Alex Borstein, Mila Kunis, and Seth Green would be too expensive to have in for multiple days, and so figured having Seth cycle between the 3 of them would be more cost-effective. Or, who the fuck wants to play as Chris Griffin? No matter the reason, I have no clue why they decided on giving each character completely unrelated storylines. Maybe it would have worked in a Sonic Adventure 2-esque setup. You know, at the start of the game you have the option to select the Peter, Brian, or Stewie campaign. However, for reasons I'll get into later, it seems to only hinder the overall experience. Because of this, I figured I'd just focus on each character on their own, considering there is next to nothing cohesive when it comes to anything going on with them. I'll start with Stewie, given he's the character you begin as. Although it is worth mentioning the game starts by showcasing this story takes place sometime within the PTV episode of Season 4, where Peter sets up his own television network. Even if this whole thing has nothing to do with that episode. So Stewie's story, I guess, starts with him running into longtime rival Bertram, who has some villainous plan to take over the world. And so it's up to you, and by you I mean Stewie, to track him down, find out what he's up to, and put a stop to him. It's a tale for the ages. His gameplay revolves around platforming and shooting your way through these enclosed areas, taking on the hordes of enemies trying to kill ya, most of which are just Tara Strong doing her Timmy Turner voice. It's not as open as I imagine fans of the show would have wanted. There's not much exploration to be found here. Sorry to the millions of people who were really desperate to explore Quahog, because the most you're getting here are these tiny little areas with a constant top-down view. That thankfully doesn't stop them from shoving in as many references as possible. Being developed around the time the series was in Season 4, it's neat to get something like this, which primarily pays homage to those first 3 seasons. As you shrink down to explore Peter's body, go to Cheesy Charlie's and see a plethora of gags taken from the show, even if sometimes they can be executed pretty poorly. You know, gags like Lois using the vacuum to scare Brian is a lot less funny when she randomly starts glitching out of nowhere. Okay, bad example, that makes it infinitely funnier. Then there are other attempts at comedy that I just couldn't picture the actual Family Guy staff writing because they're just so bizarre. Maybe it's just the way it's executed, but I can't imagine anyone saying something like this and saying, "Ha, that's the Family Guy I know and love." Stewie unfortunately has the strongest gameplay out of the 3. Unfortunate because still not very good. It's just the one that has the most depth, and even that is minimal. Because of how the game is paced, you probably only spend around an hour or so with each character, and so there's not much room to expand upon things, even if I can appreciate Stewie's levels attempting to. It's mainly through the upgrades to his ray gun. By collecting enough yellow bolts, it'll get stronger, or you'll obtain an entirely different move to perform by holding down the button, such as a grenade or shockwaves that'll kill everything around you. There's even an upgrade that kills your eardrums. But for the most part, you're just wandering down a linear path waiting for your progress to be blocked until you defeat the group of enemies coming in to kill ya. He's even got a lock-on button, which is helpful, sure, but removes any kind of challenge as you can just run in circles while spamming the shoot button. No need to aim at all. The only other shake-up we see are brief moments of swimming, where all you gotta do is veer him in the right direction or shoot at obstacles. They're so short and he can take so many hits before dying that it's nothing to worry about. The only parts of Stewie's campaign that got to me were the brief moments of vertical platforming. His jump was so hard to get used to, especially his glide. It took me ages to figure out that you're supposed to keep the button held down on the second jump instead of pressing it again to glide, because he drops like a brick before activating it. And if you mess up, you generally have to go through the entire segment over again. Still though, nothing awful, and there were actually a couple gags here that made me laugh. Like when you keep using your mind control device to get someone into Bertram's lair, but after each attempt fails, he finally decides fuck it and shoots the guards instead. I mean, a Family Guy stealth game? Who the fuck would want to play that? So Brian's gameplay is all about stealth. He's been wrongfully accused by Carter of getting Seabreeze pregnant. Again! Yeah, a lot of this game is just spent rehashing early episodes. Either way, it's up to Brian to figure out who actually did it, and clear his name. It was Quagmire, no doubt. Brian easily has it the worst out of the three. It is just an hour of slowly tiptoeing your way through the same batch of rooms over and over again, never getting any closer to your destination.
Now that these morons are sated, I can get to work looking for that
That what? The detection mechanic is so busted. Sometimes I would try to get around people for ages and it would never work. I couldn't figure out how to get past. Then I would just try again and waltz on through with no issue. They attempt to add other features to spice things up from time to time, but they barely worked. Such as the invisibility power-up, which for some reason doesn't stop enemies from seeing you if you barely just graze past them. Or later on you can find disguises so nobody bats an eye at you, like the classic Banana Brian. Like, Banana Brian, what are you doing here? But they introduced this in tandem with another feature, where Brian will have this bone meter in the top corner. If Brian gets too distracted by whatever has his interest, the meter will fill up and he'll lose control. Like peeing on a fire hydrant or humping a lady, in which doing so automatically results in you losing your disguise for some reason. Your only way of getting it back being to hide in shadows for a second. That's fine and all, but sometimes I would get caught and then restart the segment without my disguise, in which going into the shadow does nothing. Not that it even matters, because with half the enemies in here, there's a split second given before they fully catch you. And so all you have to do sometimes is keep tapping on the analog stick, making Brian move ever so slightly, and then let go again before they catch you.
Hey, who put that lamp here? Hey, who put that lamp here? Hey, who put that lamp here?
They'll never know. I don't think I'd mind nearly as much if it didn't feel like each and every mission was wasting my time. Every time he gets to the end of some long-ass stage, he goes, "Oh wait, I guess it wasn't this person. I suppose I'll go check somewhere else. I am Brian." And ironically, the missions only got more easy as the game went on. They start you off with some hard-ass rooms to get through, but I completed Brian's last two stages on my first try. It was a complete cakewalk. Which I'm eternally grateful for, as some of these rooms are fucking massive. And getting caught typically means having to go all the way back to the beginning. It was a real nightmare at times, and I think in certain instances, I just got so tired of them that I would just try and brute force my way through, hoping eventually things would work out. But whatever, he eventually proves his innocence. And so all that leaves us with is Peter, who probably has the most bare-bones gameplay out of all of them. Peter Griffin is in a side-scrolling beat-em-up. It's not a horrible idea, I guess. But when all you're doing is spamming the same two attacks the entire time, I want to kill myself. Peter is on the search for Mr. Belvedere, who he thinks has kidnapped his entire family. That's right, his entire campaign revolves around a baseless delusion that you know nothing will come from. Can't wait to see what happens. It's cool getting to actually run around Quahog for a change, before you realize that in Season 3 the town really hadn't gathered that many iconic locations you'd want to see in 3D, so it's mostly just parking lots and neighborhoods. Wow, I can't believe it's the classic Family Guy parking lot! Finally! Because of this, they had to pull from what they could, although surprisingly they mainly give attention to Season 1, again like Cheesy Charlie's or the casino from that one episode. I honestly don't have much to say about Peter's gameplay, it's kinda mindless. He can punch and kick and do about 2 combos, neither of which are worth doing because they require alternating between the punch and kick, but only some enemies can be defeated with a punch, and only some with a kick, and so your best bet is to find out which one damages them, and spam it till you win. Eventually your super meter fills up and you can do a bunch of other different moves, but the only one worth using is the first one you unlock. It takes up very little energy to do and pretty much insta-kills every enemy. They try to balance this by only allowing you to do it if you have enough meter, which you can fill through collecting food items. But halfway through they start giving you food that fills it up incredibly fast. I assume to encourage you to use the other moves, but no, the first one's fucking great. Those casino stages were a breeze, because the corn you get for defeating enemies fills your bar up more than what performing the super move costs. And so you can basically just spam it till your heart's content. I think they were aware of how boring this all was and tried to spice things up a tad, by eventually making it so Peter changes his outfits between stages. He's Hooker Peter, Anna, Blackface, all of which do a pretty poor job at hiding the fact that you're just button mashing for an hour. You know, when I thought Family Guy video game, this is quite possibly the last thing I would have imagined. The main thing that was keeping me entertained throughout all this was the odd graphical glitches. So many times a character would randomly T-pose for a split second, even during the final boss fight. Or we'd have this crab slowly drag this kid into the pits of hell as he begged for mercy.
Your sandcastle is substandard. It shall be destroyed.
Really though, it kind of was all worth it for the final stage, where Peter is confronted by the giant chicken and the two have a fight to the death. It's very automated, the game will not let you kill him until it gets through all its set pieces, but I honestly really appreciated how all out they went on this part, even if it doesn't really reflect the rest of the experience. Same thing with the cutaway gags. That's right, the game will randomly stop at points to have the characters set up a joke, and then we'll cut to an interactive minigame where succeeding grants you a power-up. And every time you die, again, something very easy to do in Brian's stages, you have to sit through the entire cutaway again. This would be a bigger issue if they didn't have so few cutaways in the first place. You know, it's good because it means less shit to tediously sit through, but it only makes me question their inclusion. On the menu, they give you the option to replay any of these cutaway minigames, but at the end of the day, there's only like 10 of them. They last around 5 seconds each, and some of them are just this. Or this.
We couldn't afford another minigame, so, how about pressing a button? Yeah, do that.
Like, sure, that's funny, but in what world would I ever want to replay this? I don't get why it's an option. If I can give the game one positive, it's that I like what they tried to do graphically, going for a cel-shaded style, along with giving the characters textured faces to try and more accurately mimic the show's style. You know, for as good as Hit and Run is, I do sometimes forget how horrific these characters are in 3D, looking at you, Lisa. And the music, well, it all just sounds like stock music. Probably because it is all stock music. Honestly, it kinda works. A lot of the jazzy stock music used in Ren and Stimpy or SpongeBob somehow fits with Family Guy more than you assume it would. But the issue only really arises when it's one of those obvious ones that's been used in everything. It takes me right out of it. I mean, it's Family Guy for PS2! I want to be immersed, goddammit! Overall, though, the most baffling choice here, and the number one thing that brought the game down for me, was the pacing. You are constantly switching between Peter, Brian, and Stewie throughout the entire game, and there is no rhyme or reason for when you switch. Would be playing as Stewie for like 5 minutes only to be thrown into a 20-minute Peter level. It really makes you feel like you are moving at a fucking snail's pace, like nothing is being done in this thing. Like I said earlier, it reminded me a lot of the structure for a story in Sonic Adventure 2, and it pisses me off just as much there too. What do you mean I gotta sit through 3 Knuckles and Tails levels before I can be Sonic again? Now imagine that feeling, but there is no Sonic. There is no style I am looking forward to playing. It's like if Sonic Adventure 2 only consisted of Knuckles, Tails, and Brian Griffin. Family Guy the video game sucks, but saying all that, I have to admit that if I had gotten this from the store way back then, I would have loved it. Just being able to play as the characters would have been enough for me. As I was running through the same Brian mission 5 times in a row trying to beat it, running out of health on the Peter stages and having to start over, or dealing with the horrific platforming of Stewie, in the back of my mind all I could think was, damn, if only I had this game when I was 10. So in some ways, I do regret not being able to play this sooner because as a Family Guy fan and child, all of the bullshit would have been a-okay with me. Now, there's no sales numbers available for Family Guy, just a bunch of middling at best reviews, but given the fact there was no sequel for 6 years, I can imagine it didn't do very well. Wonder why. But by the time of the next game, Family Guy was in a very different place than it was in 2006, so I'm curious to witness that jump in real time. But before we get to that, there's actually quite a few other Family Guy games I'd like to spotlight for a bit. So even though there are only a couple Family Guy games released for consoles, it doesn't mean there weren't a few other, smaller, interactive things that were primarily playable on browsers and phones. So let's get them over with briefly, because by God I know there would be at least one person upset I didn't bring up classics like Brian's Shoot 'em Up Bar. So let's start with that. Can you see why I didn't give each of these their own segment? What's up, guys? Here's my Let's Play of Stewie's Candle Blaster. Alright, thanks guys for watching my Let's Play of Stewie's Candle Blaster. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. There are some of these I just couldn't find archived anywhere, like Near Death Golf, which I have to assume is a golfing game based off the Season 3 episode. Our Family Guy Slots, which I think is safe to guess what that looked like. Our first phone game came out for Java devices titled Stewie 2.0, which actually looked pretty in-depth considering it released on this fucking thing. Got a 6.6 in IGN, that's pretty good, I think. I couldn't find much information about it other than a couple screenshots, which show off a charming enough art style. Not sure what happened with Chris, but apparently we have to save him.
God.
I guess all the Family Guys have been kidnapped by Stewie's clone, and so it's up to you to try and get them all back or something. I don't fucking know. It looks like a strategy game. One of the cooler projects released around this time was a crossover between American Dad titled American Dad vs. Family Guy Kung Fu 2 Turbo Hyper Mega Edition. A basic fighting game where you gotta play as anyone from the Smiths or the Griffins. Or Ryu. This was officially approved by Capcom. I appreciate them giving everyone their own unique outfit as well as the more creative ways they had to work around inserting some of these characters like Klaus. It's obviously quite simple looking, but for 2006, this would have blew my mind if I knew what Family Guy or American Dad was then. We got Family Guy Air Griffin. Somehow this is the official trailer. There was a DVD trivia game. Actually looks kinda neat, I'd like to play that someday. Stewie's Arsenal saw you playing through 4 mini-games, all of which aimed to fuck with one member of the family. Like shooting up all Peter's brain cells Space Invader style with the creepiest sound effects they could have possibly used. You wreak havoc in the grocery store, maneuver your way around the house to mind control Chris, and finally launch snowballs at Meg, decent for what it is. See if the couch is based off the classic moment from their Star Wars special, and it's just a case of dodging the stormtroopers while other characters obscure your vision.
Well, kid, I guess this is goodbye.
Waka waka.
Family Guy Uncensored is probably the best out of these. Also the only one to get a sequel. It's another minigame collection, but graphically it's way better than what came before. It was the first of these to come out on iPhones, so I suppose it was needed. But it's actually got a story mode with character interactions and stuff. A lot of it is building mini-games off events from the show, like helping Brian avoid Stewie who's looking for his money. But others are totally unique, like having Quagmire swing from vine to vine to reach Lois. Nothing special these days, but at the time I would have eaten this shit up. Sequel doesn't look nearly as strong, being a side-scrolling adventure with Brian and Stewie going through different time periods to collect uranium. I don't know, I find the setup a lot less interesting this time around. You could have stuck any cartoon in these locations and it would have fit about as well as Family Guy. Decent gameplay, but just not what I want from a Family Guy game. And I tell you, the list of things I want from a Family Guy game is about as long as the longest piece of literature ever written. Wait, what was that again? That's right, the Lighthouse thing. Now, other than a couple Candy Crush clones, a virtual pinball machine, or a halfway decent kart racer crossing over with other Hulu shows, there is one other big Family Guy game worth looking at before getting on to the next release. And that is Family Guy Online. It is perhaps the holy grail of Family Guy games, mainly because you can't play it anymore. This was a Family Guy MMO, where you can select one of the Griffin members to pick as a class, who you can then use as a base to create your own Family Guy OC, who you can then use to traverse around Quahog, getting missions from citizens of the town that you can complete while interacting with other players. That sounds like a Family Guy fan's biggest dream. Only issue? No one was playing it, which is crazy considering all the effort that was clearly put into this. Like, at the time of release, this was the most impressive looking Family Guy game yet. You can explore a massive chunk of the town, all the characters have full voice acting. What more could you want? A functional game, apparently. It was supposedly very buggy, people didn't really know why it existed in the first place.
Is we'll be able to update it and keep it going and keep Virtual Quahog evolving as Quahog does in the actual show.
It was shut down in less than a year, unfortunately becoming forever unplayable in January of 2013. I found out it existed in 2014. I'm telling you, I was distraught. I couldn't believe what I was reading, desperately trying to figure out some way to play it, rereading the articles about its takedown over and over again, hoping to find some line that read, haha, just kidding, play it right here and let all your wildest Family Guy dreams come true. But it never happened. And that was the day I learned that I'll never be happy. There is one more Family Guy mobile game worth talking about, but it released after Back to the Multiverse, so I figured I'd save it until the end as a nice little closer to see where Family Guy games are at in current year. So, enough stalling. Let's check out the game that is either super fun or super shitty, depending on who you ask. Alright, here we go. One of the cornerstones of my childhood. God, that's sad. I actually found the original copy I bought from the store that day, totaling a whopping £22. Thanks, Jake D. Yeah, that's right, I willingly stepped inside a CEX. Back to the Multiverse got very middling reviews when it came out, most sites referencing the lack of innovation or any real thing helping it stand out, while still giving it the credit of having a lot to love if you're a fan of the series. And fan I was. And so to me, this was the greatest gift from Jesus Christ himself I could have ever asked for. But why didn't others feel the same? It's strange to see the lackluster reception when you take note of the fact this game was developed by Heavy Iron Studios, aka the same guys who made Battle for Bikini Bottom, a game so beloved, it remains one of the few licensed games to receive the remake treatment. Maybe it's just because of the time of release. That came out in 2003, so I'm sure standards weren't nearly as high as they were in 2012. You know, if you look at SpongeBob compared to other big games from the time, it doesn't look like that much of a downgrade. But it was now the era of the gritty, grey, realistic shooters and stuff. All of a sudden, this cel-shaded Brian Griffin isn't so impressive. I mean, how could you not like this game? It's got the most exciting pause screen I've ever seen. I mean, if there's any indication at how much people's standards have shifted, then look no further than said remake of Battle for Bikini Bottom, which IGN ended up rating lower than Back to the Multiverse. I'm placing my bets now. If Simpsons Hit and Run ever gets the remake treatment, then it is not gonna review well. But either way, I had no idea what an IGN was in 2012. All I knew was that it was fun to run around as Brian Griffin and shoot things. I mean, am I wrong? Like I said before, I played through the campaign countless times. When I'd have a friend who liked Family Guy over, we'd go through it in co-op. One of them liked it so much they bought the game for themselves, and so I went over to his house and we completed the game co-op on his system. I couldn't get enough. Given the title, you'd be right in assuming this was based off the Road to the Multiverse special.
Oink. Oh my god!
And let's be real, you could not have picked a better episode to base a game on. Each stage being given the freedom to take the characters to whatever crazy world the developers can imagine. You know, now that I think about it, Family Guy sort of hopped on the multiverse thing before it was cool. That's something. Bertram has, once again, set out to enact some master plan by gathering an army across the multiverse. So it's up to Stewie and Brian to chase after and put a stop to him. Like last time, hope you weren't excited to play as anyone else from the family outside of multiplayer, but at least the box art this time makes it clear who the stars are. Family Guy was in a much different place than it was at the time of the first game. Now being in only Season 8, what the fuck? Jesus Christ, you know, this game released closer to when Family Guy first premiered in 1999 to where it is right now. Kind of fucking with me. One of the major shifts that had happened in the show by this point was the relationship between Brian and Stewie. After the success of the first couple of Road 2s, where their pairing was treated as the irregularity that it was at the time, the two started sharing the spotlight more and more often, Brian shifting away from being Peter's sidekick and more into being Stewie's. I'd say around this point in the show, their dynamic was at its best. The two constantly bickering and shitting on each other, but still having a solid bond keeping them together, as they both gave commentary towards whatever is happening in each multiverse. Which, speaking of, is an aspect of the game I find to be severely underwhelming. Even as a kid, I could recognize that they did not go as far with this as they could have. There are 10 levels in Back to the Multiverse, 8 technically, given the final 2 are only boss fights. But I'll give you a quick rundown on every stage, and you tell me if you start to notice a pattern. Stage 1 strangely starts us off with a neighborhood consisting of only frat houses, filled with rowdy 20-somethings drinking and smoking pot, bro. Stage 2 sees us go to Amishtown. Straightforward enough. Stage 3 has us in a world filled with people who have disabilities, primarily taking place around the city and hospital areas. Stage 4 then takes us to Evil Quahog, filled with everyone's evil counterpart, although we only end up seeing Evil Stewie and Evil Mayor West. Stage 5 has Mayor West send us on a mission to assassinate Mayor McCheese in a scenario definitely not based on any real-world event. Stage 6 has us get kidnapped by pirates as we have to get our weapons back and defeat Long John Peter. Stage 7 has us go to the North Pole to kill Santa. 8 has us in space filled with robot chickens.
I hate robot chickens.
I heard that, you son of a bitch!
9 has us back in Quahog where Peter has a standoff with a giant chicken. And finally, 10 also has us in Quahog fighting Bertram and his alternate universe selves as he rides atop a dinosaur. If you haven't caught on to the issue so far, let me spell it out for you. Isn't it fucking lame that in a game all about traveling through the endless multiverse, where anything is on the table, that half of these levels just takes place in the city? I can't be the only one bothered by that, right? Like, of course I imagine it's a budgetary thing and all. It's a lot cheaper to take the Quahog map, put a red filter over it, and call it Evil Quahog, than design an entirely new area, but dude, that sucks. Just look at the actual Multiverse episode for reference and really take in how varied all those places were. Fuck it, in the world where this game got infinite time and resources, it would have been sweet if they switched up the art style in every stage. Make the characters look realistic for a level, make them look like they're made out of clay or something, I don't know, have fun with it. Maybe that's me asking for too much, but whereas kid me felt this game was endless, I can now really see the restrictions replaying it today. I'll give a couple examples to show off what I mean. The city levels tend to be giant with these sprawling backgrounds. Look at the Mayor McCheese stage, which, by the way, is not a multiverse. Also, I thought this was still Evil World. Where'd the fucking filter go? Whatever. Feels like I'm running across the rooftops of this massive city. There are other stages which at first come off as creative or something new, before you run through the entire thing in 10 minutes, and then it's back to the next 30-minute city level. Then you have stages like Santa's Workshop, which is visually distinct and pretty lengthy, but also, it's not a multiverse, no matter what lame excuse you come up with. That's just an episode you wanted to call back to. That's fine, but so many levels here are too concerned with referencing episodes that they forget these stages are supposed to take place in entirely different universes. You can say, this is a world entirely filled with Amish people. But no, you just wanted to reference the fucking episode. There are exactly 4 stages in this game that feel like full-fledged levels, and unfortunately, it doesn't always make them automatically good. Again, like the Amish stage. Probably my least favorite in the whole game. Just super long and tedious to get through, the entire thing being one linear path filled with enemies to shoot. This is a stage that could afford to be shorter. Whereas in comparison, the pirate one starts with you in jail, you get out, go to the top of the ship, and that's the entire level right there, you've seen everything. And this wouldn't be the biggest issue. If anything, the varied level lengths are encouraged to break things up from time to time. But when there are only 10 stages in the entire thing, it's hard not to feel like you've been shortchanged a tad. Like I said though, even saying there are 10 is generous. When you get back to Quahog, Peter and the giant chicken follow you, in which you're suddenly playing as him in a one-on-one. Now you gotta stop and beat... I want to say his name is Ernie, I feel like, am I imagining that? There's a surprising amount of depth to this segment, given it's the only time in the game you're doing it. But you can punch, block, do a charge punch that breaks the block, grind pound, dash to send them flying. A lot of work was put into this moment, which, 1, goes by in a flash, and 2, never feels like an actual challenge because you can take so much damage before dying. While replaying this, I started to recall as a kid, me purposefully trying to get to as little health as possible, just so I felt like I was actually struggling. I don't even really know what my point here is. I enjoy this moment, the game is better with this moment in it, but couldn't you have spent that development time somewhere else? And then the final boss is just a joke. Super easy, first of all. Just 3 phases of aiming towards his head. But this map of Quahog is massive! Way bigger than it needs to be for the fight. And that's when I played the multiplayer and realized they just ripped a multiplayer map and put it here for the final boss. Or the other way around, whatever. But it suddenly made sense why there were so many buildings I could run in or get to the roof of. It's a decent multiplayer map, but it doesn't make this feel like any more of a proper level, just because you stuck a fucking dinosaur in it. So really, there's just 8 stages here, and some of them are like the pirate ship one or the intro level, which are super tiny and short. Now, all that being said, the one aspect that makes up for the small scope is just how much fan service they managed to shove in here. This game is taken up from like a 5 to a 7 in my books from just how much work went into making it feel like Family Guy, with all the exaggerated swagger of a white dog. First of all, visually, this is easily the best way they could have translated Family Guy into 3D in 2012. They kept that cel-shaded look with the textured faces. Aside from a couple clipping issues, the animations look great when they're not restricting themselves to look super rigid. A lot of the cutscenes in this game are harmed by purposely trying to stick to Family Guy's way of animating. They even kept the fucking death animation the same. But also, full voice acting with constant banter throughout the stages, which are filled with secondary characters who also sound like just how you'd expect. No Mr. Krabs situations over here.
Phew! You had me worried there for a bit, boy. Worried for me money, of course.
Entire thing was written by the actual Family Guy staff. I can only imagine how much of their budget was taken up by paying writers and especially voice actors. But I'd say it paid off. Stages are filled with secondary characters, including the other members of the Griffin family. So when you get to see them floating around, standing in the distance, or Meg getting injured in some way, it feels like a fun Easter egg. Sparks some life into these levels. The menu is great, Meg's gorilla arms withstanding. Love that they played news clips from the show on the TV. I love the loading screen. The music in this game is the perfect blend of original tracks, score ripped directly from the show, and... okay, I'm positive some of this is still stock music. But really, short length aside, it's got everything you could possibly want from a Family Guy game. So, why the less than stellar reception? Well, buried underneath all the excellent fan service and fun ideas is a very, very okay third-person shooter. Not bad, not bad. Gotta clarify that. But it's one of those cases where if this had no attachment to the Family Guy branding, nobody would have given a crap about it. And people already didn't give a crap about it, so that should say something. You're free to switch between Stewie and Brian at any given time. They both control the exact same, with the differences being in their weapons. Stewie has his sciencey gadgets like ray guns and dynamite you can trigger after throwing, whereas Brian has more traditional guns like a pistol or a shotgun. At first, Stewie was easily the go-to. Brian's pistol sucks compared to Stewie's ray gun, but over the course of the game you unlock more and more new weapons, as well as a bunch being available to you in the store to purchase with the in-game currency. And by the end of the game, it's safe to say Brian is the better character by far. He gets a sweet reel gun, which is really helpful during the final boss. The shotgun is super strong, but by far my favorite weapon in the whole game is the stun gun. The longer you hold it in, the more targets it hits. The electricity shooting from one enemy to another if they're close enough. Once I bought this, it was all I used. It is way too overpowered. There was this moment during the Space level where I had to trigger a lever on the upper floor to unveil some generators below. Then I had to go down and destroy them in time. It's quite tedious. But the stun gun was so overpowered that it hit off the enemies above to the generators below and destroyed them with ease. I wish I could show you this, but my very legal way of playing this game would not stop fucking crashing, and so I lost the footage for this moment. I'm telling you, this has nothing to do with the game itself, but there were times I couldn't even get the game running for 5 minutes without it crashing over and over again, and so I had to just keep inching along, hoping I could find the next checkpoint before I had to restart the thing. There's a secondary objective to do in each stage, but they're pretty pointless. Just walk around the map looking for a certain amount of objects, basic shit. I actually did this in the Santa stage with all the Rupert plushies because doing so would allow me to unlock Snoopy Brian as a costume. And I really wanted the Snoopy Brian costume. But when I got them all and got to the boss fight, my game crashed and all my progress was lost. No Snoopy Brian for me. But really, the game just suffers from a lack of variety. All you're doing 99% of the time is mowing down the same 3 enemy types in each stage, and following waypoints where you just have to press a single button to progress. In the pirate stage, you have to shoot cannons at other ships for a bit, and some of the other boss fights offer a slightly different challenge, but those moments are brief. And with the characters having a pretty generous auto-aim, there's no real strategy involved in killing the enemies. Again, once I got the stun gun and Stewie's dynamite, I was set. And so in the end, while certainly being nothing special, the most average third-person shooter imaginable, I still think there's a lot to like about Back to the Multiverse. But if you're not that big a fan of Family Man, then you're probably best avoiding it. Not that there really are any ways to play it without grabbing an original copy nowadays, since Activision ended up taking it off all digital stores. R.I.P. Back to the Multiverse. Somehow still makes it the best Family Guy game out there, but if I'm being real, it's still a 10 in my heart. And I enjoyed every second of replaying it all these years later. Except when it kept fucking crashing! Despite being the last console Family Guy game, doesn't mean Back to the Multiverse was the last Family Guy game, though. Instead, that would come in the form of Family Guy, The Quest for Stuff, which came out in 2014 and is surprisingly still running to this very day. How so? Well, The Quest for Stuff is something we in the biz like to call a freemium game. A term popularized by the famous South Park episode, freemium games really started to blow up with the advent of the App Store, perhaps the most famous example being The Simpsons Tapped Out. But there's one of these based off every fucking show out there, SpongeBob, the Smurfs for some reason. Freemium games feature a very simple but very addicting gameplay loop, designed to give the player just enough fun to feel satisfaction from playing every day, but holding out the seemingly really fun stuff behind an amount of in-game currency so great that the player is encouraged to spend real-life money to unlock it instantly. It makes sense for popular TV shows to jump on this train, with an already established set of characters and locations that people have some kind of attachment to. It's more likely they'll want to spend their hard-earned money to get them for their virtual time. I just gotta see a tiny mole man on my phone, I just gotta! I played the fuck out of Tapped Out when I first discovered the App Store. I played that shit for hours on end, every day for years. I was a stupid kid who didn't know how money worked, or malware apparently, and so I would go on dodgy websites promising me all the donuts my heart desires, only for my dad to get phone calls from his bank asking why he's sending a shit ton of money to China or some shit. I don't know, I was dumb. This is unrelated, but I was genuinely one of those kids who would believe those sites that promise to give you Minecraft for free if you put your credit card number in. Not that I ever did it, but I was this close to convincing a friend's parents to do it so they could get the game and we could play together. It just seemed like a no-brainer at the time. I'm gonna stop talking now. I'm not gonna give some in-depth review on Quest for Stuff, even though I do remember putting a lot of time into it back in the day. Who knows, maybe when it eventually shuts down, I'll give it some massive retrospective, if that's something anybody would want to watch. I wouldn't blame you if not. But I'm mostly surprised it's managed to outlast The Simpsons Tapped Out that got shut down earlier this year, whereas Quest for Stuff is still growing seemingly strong. Tapped Out launched 2 years earlier though, so if we get to 2027 with Family Guy alive and well, then it's going to be a rare case in which they beat The Simpsons on something. That is, if longer-running freemium game is something worth bragging about to you. But with that, we've reached the end of this freaking sweet journey. If I'm being completely honest, this video started with me looking at every Simpsons game, but I'm only like 7 in and really stuck on this hard-ass MS-DOS game, so expect that sometime in the near future whenever I actually beat them all. But this was a nice little diversion to break up that even more tedious endeavor. Who knows, maybe next I'll do South Park, or Fairly Odd Parents, or SpongeBob. Okay, fuck no, they got how many games?